I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman,
And I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
and today we're going to be discussing some books about maritime life on Puget Sound. So these are all books that I used as background when I was writing Delivery Delayed.
And most of the tales of Chetzemoka, honestly.
And most of the tales of Chetzemoka, because those take place on Puget Sound. And in Puget Sound in the 19th century, boats were a huge, huge part of life.
They were the main way to get around.
Yeah.
Roads were not in very much existence yet.
Well, and just the geography of Washington, what was then Washington Territory, it's just not very conducive to roads, because it's basically, if you can kind of get a rough idea of the geography of Puget Sound if you make a fist and stick out your thumb, because your thumb's going to be the Olympic Peninsula, and then this area between your thumb and your hand is going to be Puget Sound. And then you've got the Straits of Juan de Fuca and Admiralty Inlet up here. Seattle is basically down kind of halfway through that section of your forefinger. But there's so much water, well, you can't put roads across Puget Sound. It is just way too big. The most you can do, there are a couple of bridges from the islands that are closest to the mainland.
And between a peninsula like at Tacoma Narrows and things like that.
Right, but that didn't come until the 20th century.
Right.
In the 19th century, you were going on boats if you were crossing all those territories.
And it was far more effective and cheap and quick to travel by boat than to climb over the mountains, which were covered with massive trees or massive stumps at that point, which were equally difficult to remove if you're a road builder.
Right.
And it was equally
These
difficult
mountains are not inconsiderable.
They were serious, and they were hard to build railroads in as well, just as difficult as it was to build roads, and it was just really hard to get around.
Yeah. So, boats were big, and you had everything from the Indian canoes to the mosquito fleet, which are tiny little vessels, all the way up to big ocean-going steam and sail ships.
And giant rafts of logs that were just chained together and then floated down the sound.
Right. And so you had all of these concurrently in the 19th century. And so writing about the 19th century in the Puget Sound region entails learning about all of them. It's really complicated, but fun, really fun. And the book that I found the most helpful is, of course it would be the biggest one.
Of course it would.
And that's Lewis and Dryden's Marine History of the Pacific Northwest. Now, this is a reference book. This is not
one to read cover to cover.
Not one to read cover to cover. This is not one you're going to pull down off the shelf and say, "Ooh, I'm bored. Let me read this from..."
Unless you're really bored.
Or unless you are the biggest marine history nerd ever.
Yes, and they certainly are out there.
They're certainly out there. It is a fantastic resource. This is a who's who of ship's captains. It's a who's who of boats. And it is an extensive, detailed history of boats in the region. And as such, it was hugely helpful in writing Delivery Delayed, because if I had a boat name or a captain name or Wonder of Wonders both, I could look it up in here and find out its whole history and,
Any detail you might want to know.
yes, the genealogy of all the ships, basically.
Yes.
I could find out where it was built, when it was built, what accidents it was in, when it burned to the waterline, which a lot of them did.
A lot of them did. It was a refrain that was very common in this book.
Yes.
And then she burned to the waterline.
Right. Happened a lot, especially with steamships, because they had a lot of fire to make the steam, to make the ship go.
And they burned many cords of wood every day.
Right.
And eventually that'll get out of hand. Or the boiler will explode.
Yeah, that happens.
Yes.
That happens.
With distressing frequency.
With distressing frequency, yes. And a lot of younger people especially ask me, well, how do you learn anything without just Googling it? It's like, you read books. You look it up in a book.
And one of the things about reading it in a book is that you often come across a lot of other related information so that it helps you tie it all together in your brain.
Right, exactly. This is not just
a little information nugget.
Right, it's not just when was this built, it was built such and such date, full stop, you get no more information, that's it. No, this is all the information.
Mm-hmm.
This is all the information. That's what reference books are for. And this one's great. It's not a fun read. Like Gabriel said, this is not one you read cover to cover. One you read cover to cover is Ships of the Inland Sea.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fun narrative history. And it's nonfiction, but it's written as a story. It's written as an interesting story. And as such, it has a lot of the fun little folksy anecdotes.
Mm-hmm.
The I remember when...
It's sort of an oral history.
Right. This is more of an oral history. And the Maritime History Reference Book, this is from 1895.
Mm-hmm.
So this was published at the time a lot of these ship's captains were still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously not the ones they recount burning to the waterline, but a lot of the other ships...
Some of the people survived that.
Right.
Some of the people did,
survived
even
that.
if the ships didn't.
Yes. But what I was going to say is a lot of the ships are still on the water
Mm-hmm.
at this point. Whereas this book was written later in the 20th century, and in this book you find out you find out about the ships that were retired and what happened to those. And a distressing number of those were intentionally burned in 4th of July celebrations or seafair celebrations.
What are we going to do with this old boat? I don't know. Let's blow it up.
Yeah, let's reenact a pirate chase and we'll burn a ship because we've got all these old ships hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
They did that with lamentable frequency, which is really sad for history.
Yes.
But that's what this book's for. That's what narrative books are for. And then there's the coffee table books, which the coffee table books, what characterizes them is that they're very heavy on photographs.
Images.
Yeah, lots and lots of images, they're very interesting and useful for their own detail. I mean, there's the old aphorism, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Often these will have the nuggets of information that I could then take to the reference book and delve deeper.
Right.
Basically, research I think of it as a series of spider webs where you find one nugget of information and that's your spider, and from that you go out to all these different paths of finding more information.
And from our perspective, it's really good to have information from a variety of different types of perspectives and in different types of materials. An image can tell you different things than a reference book can, because it can record information that no one actually thought was worth preserving, but the image happened to capture it.
Right.
You know, the problem with these reference books, of course, is that they only include the information that the people thought was important to include.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, as a researcher far later on, we're interested in details that they didn't think were important.
Right. The reference book is not going to include details like passengers on this ship would often wear this, and this. Whereas a photograph will show you exactly what they were wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, there's a lot of people. And the pictures will also give you an idea. It's one thing to see numbers and statistics.
Mm-hmm. It's
It's another thing to see a ship versus a person and get a real feel for the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing to hear, they burned such and such number of cords of wood a day. It's another thing to actually see the piles and piles of wood that were being burned to get these ships on the water. And they were really, the coffee table books with all the pictures were also a really powerful reminder that all of these ships were on the water at the same time.
How crowded Puget Sound could be at times.
Especially in the 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
By the late 90s, steam was really taking over. But in the 1880s, you had tall sailing ships. I mean, they're a little more advanced than the ones in the 18th century where you get the Patrick O'Brien stuff, but they're still very reminiscent of the grand days of sail. And you also have these big steamships with massive boilers.
Both the sort of, stern wheelers, side wheelers, and then the actual screw-driven, what we think of now as a ship with a propeller under the water in the back.
And you had the huge variety of indigenous canoes, all of the native canoes. So basically,
and as I said, these rafts made of just logs, wrapped together with chain, just floating in massive clumps.
Right. So I think that the image that would be the best, the images, plural, that would be the best way for a modern audience to wrap their minds around Puget Sound at the time. Now this will blow your mind, but try to picture it. Okay, you got to picture the tall sailing ships from Master and Commander, or from Pirates of the Caribbean, if you're a different generation, all those big pirate ships, plus Titanic, and lots of steamships. I mean, not quite as big as Titanic, but getting there.
Plus the sort of, stern wheelers and side wheelers like in Steamboat Willie.
Right, and all the Mark Twain type stuff, because honestly, a lot of the Mosquito Fleet ships had started out as steamships on the Mississippi, and they were brought all the way around up to Puget Sound. They didn't work very well on Puget Sound because the weather on Puget Sound is very, very different from the weather on the Mississippi.
And there's a lot more waves, and there's tides, and there's,
Yeah, they weren't very well suited to Puget
more rocks,
Sound.
less mud.
Right. They weren't well suited, but they were there. And you've got the Indian canoes. Now that ranged from one-man Indian canoes all the way up to huge canoes built out of entire old-growth trees. And so
40 or 60 people.
Yeah, and I don't think there's even a movie that covered that, because no one has made those anymore.
No.
I mean, they've CGI'd the Titanic. They have CGI'd the sailing ships for Pirates of the Caribbean and the Patrick O'Brian books, but no one's even ventured to try to recreate the Indian canoes, which were impressive.
Yes.
Very impressive stuff. And I think it's partly because it's been so long since anyone's... Well, a few of the tribes have recreated just a few.
But they haven't been...
And,
So one of the reasons that they couldn't replicate those sorts of canoes anymore is they just didn't have large enough trees.
Right.
Or those trees had become protected and impossible to cut down.
Right. But, given that film producers have managed to, replicate, on screen at least, the Titanic and the old sailing ships, I wish someone would have a go at depicting the just fleet of Indian canoes that used to travel back and forth across Puget Sound.
The problem is that I don't think people would believe it.
I don't think they would.
People have a mental image of the Titanic. They have a mental image of classic, the sort of golden age of sail type ships.
Right.
But I don't think they have an image of exactly how amazing those canoes could have been.
And that is why they fail.
Yes.
That is why they fail to imagine just how cool this part of history was, because it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think people fail to understand the juxtaposition of all of these technologies coexisting at the same time.
Yes.
They tend to think of a sequence. They tend to think there were these ships, then these ships, then these ships. But no, there was a lot of overlap. And that's what you see when you start reading about them and you start seeing actual pictures of the time. And that's why it's so very cool to research this part of history and why I find it so fascinating.
Yes.
So, hope you'll check out some of these books. I'll list the titles down in underneath the video. And I hope you'll check out my books as well.
Yes.
We hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up. And remember to tell your friends about those books that I hope you're enjoying. Happy reading!